Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode one of the Fulcrum of Education podcast. My name is Andrew. I am the founder of Heretic School, a startup building hyper-personalized education for homeschoolers. And my co-host here is Elijah, who I'll let introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Elijah Whitbeck, and I am the Chief Technology Officer at my own little startup, Purix LLC. Andrew and I kind of do similar things. We're in the ed tech space, just trying to figure out how we can make education accessible, personalizable, and just better overall.
Exactly. And then that really brings us to why we called this podcast the Fulcrum of Education, which is sort of a really dorky name, but we're two really dorky people, so that sounds about right. Fundamentally, neither of us thinks that education is getting better as fast as it should, especially, compared to rapid advances in technology across the whole stack, and especially as more people get connection to the internet across the world, the same structures of education are being used, despite the fact they just don't have to be. So we're trying to be the fulcrum to drive that forward far, far faster. So, you agree with that, Elijah?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A quote I like to reference. I talk to a lot of people about this, to be honest. A quote I like to reference is just imagine how advanced we could be as a society if you didn't just waste so many years in school or in prison, as some people might like to put it. And so if we can just break out, if we can find a way to break out of that and just redefine what knowledge is and redefine what to learn is, then as a culture and as a society and as a world, we will be so much more capable far into the future.
I entirely agree. I think that's actually a really excellent quote. So, I think the first point of what we should hit is, Elijah, how did you get into homeschooling and then working in ed tech? Stuff. Give me the. I know most of the story. Spell it out for
Yeah, for
those
sure.
who don't.
Actually, at least compared to you and compared to some people, I had it really easy getting in. My parents decided to start homeschooling me from day one. And so I did various co-op things through classical conversations for about 9.5 years, actually. And I most recently have kind of diverged from that program and gone off on my own using different online private school classes and such to fill in the gaps. That kind of led me, um, I don't know, the co-op that I did was designed to be all-encompassing, if that makes sense. So it was like you were going to a school, even though you were homeschooling, quote unquote. You did their curriculum, you did all of that and whatnot. And I love to plug and play stuff. So, but when I was like 8 years old, I had this love for computing and the little microprocessors and the circuits and whatever. So I would take stuff apart. I go to the library and get like books 3 inches thick on microcontrollers and C++. And the librarian was kind of like a stereotypical librarian would look at me over her glasses, and there's this little kid bringing these huge books. And so I was building my own curriculum for what I was passionate about, which was kind of for me the biggest bonus of homeschooling is that you get to plug and play whatever you want, even if you do have something like a co-op that's kind of defining the basics. And I kind of got to the point where I was done having the co-op define my basics, and I felt like I was wasting a lot of my time in many cases. So I just sprung out, and there are lots of online programs today that offer really solid courses and classes because sometimes you do need a professional teacher, and sometimes it's nice to have that level of accountability. But for the long term, long shot, being homeschooled has absolutely been the catalyst for getting me to where I am today.
Yeah, I'm incredibly jealous of Elijah that he's just started in homeschooling. My story is a little less straightforward than that. Excuse me. I was in public school until 10th grade, which is why I'm so far behind Elijah in my life. Joking, mostly. I was, went in for COVID lockdowns, and I was just, it was great for me because I could put the fucking Zoom class and one of my monitors and then read code for things I was interested in, built robots to deliver food in my parents' restaurant. This was all my free time
Right.
during COVID. Um, and then I had to go back to school for 7, 8 hours a day. It was I finished the work in 10 minutes and then sat in the back and got yelled at for reading a book. It was just horrific. So I begged my parents, hands and knees. I did some passive aggressive stuff. I forwarded them blogs about homeschooling in the middle of a class, just whatever I could get out of there. It took 4, 5 months.
Yeah.
Um, And then finally, middle of 10th grade, I started homeschooling. And it was just light years better. Like well, I just had, I did a grad bag of like, made some of my own stuff, just like classes. And some of it, I took online. Some of it I had like one-on-one with like professors who like did, once or twice a week, have a meeting, they'll teach the class. And it was great, but it wasn't like this vision of like what I wanted education to be. Like it was like 100 times better than public school, but still like 1/100th of what I thought it could be. Like I wanted something like directly personalized to me, like every step of the way. But like using these rebadged public school curriculums just like wasn't it. So I started, well, it wasn't called Heritage School at the time, but the precursor to Heritage School to build, with the advents of I think this was like GPT 3.5, which like sounds like forever ago.
No.
It feels like it feels like sticks and rocks in comparison to like new models coming out today. But with GPT 3.5, I was like, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. We should you know use AI to personalize education every step of the way towards what kids want. So I started that, and I've been on the path with that ever since, which
Cool.
brings us to today.
Yeah. So at what point did you actually fully conceptualize Heretic.school? Like when was that eureka moment for you?
So this is gonna sound even more dorky than we
Mm.
already did. I was reading Paul Grandin's Hackers and Painters, and then there's a point where he talks about how in the Renaissance, teenage kids weren't rebellious; they were apprentices. They like had meaning and purpose. Like they had utility, and that gave them purpose in life. And they didn't do like the stupid teenage rebellion thing because they had something they were living for. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And then I was reading a sci-fi series. It's called the Empire series by Richard F. Land. And like the first book, like the key towards like the development of like two of the main characters is they get access to an education system that's personalized to them. Not
Hmm.
even joking. Like this
Wow.
is what makes them rise from like backcountry hicks basically towards a literally emperor and empress of the galaxy almost.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a really sick series.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, the thing that allowed it pretty much was access to a personalized education. And I was like, this sounded like, ideas that have been floating around my head, and like, discontent with public school and
Right.
other homeschooling. I was like, I could just build it. Like that
Yeah.
was the eureka moment of like, this would be hard, but like relative to the potential impact, not, you know, insurmountable.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. Books like that for me set all kinds of dreams and goals and whatever. Especially as I was younger, they weren't necessarily eureka moments, but it was just getting lost in that, letting your imagination get poked a little bit by something, an idea someone else had. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's really cool. So you're
Probably
in.
talked to hundreds of homeschoolers at this point, and like if you just compare it to like public school kids, just how many books they've read in the last year. Like I wonder, like I don't have to wonder, I know. Like, public schoolers, it's like, oh, I've read 2 books in the last year, like if you're lucky. Like that's a pretty respectable number.
Well,
Homeschoolers, it's like, yeah, I read one a week.
yeah, and do they even understand what they're reading? Like, if they read it, can you ask them questions about it afterward, and they can actually, like, right? Is it just going in one ear and out the other, or are they actually understanding it? So isn't that kind of like the
Absolutely.
whole model of Heretic.school? Just have people read content and answer questions. Maybe it's not the model, maybe it's a model within the model, I guess. So is that kind of like your biggest focus is just getting people to actually understand what they're reading?
It starts with like what do you care about learning?
Okay.
So, what's your dream job? What's like the biggest personal interest? Things like that. Backpedal it, back propagate to what content you need to read to build a foundation to become, expert in doing what you love. So it's like watch a video or read a book or read an article or read a blog post, answer a couple questions, and then do a project based on that knowledge that you just gained. Based on how you do on that project, give them more content, the cycle repeats. And it's this flywheel, and it's fun because you do what you love, because you genuinely care about learning it, instead of like, all right, I have to rub two sticks together. Like it's just not.
Right. Yeah. So much. That's actually a really good analogy, rubbing two sticks together for so much of what traditional education has to offer today. Do you think that Heretic.School, maybe it's not just Heretic.School, maybe it's a variety of tools within a global platform, kind of like Cal Sans, the One World Schoolhouse concept. Uh, do you think that, well, firstly, do you think Heretic.School is a viable replacement for traditional education slash homeschooling? Do you have like a long-term plan for that, or do you like envision separate modules that can kind of come together and work together to build the total education, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Dependent on having childcare for your family taken care of, which is a big challenge in homeschooling. Like no denying that.
Absolutely.
Though there are startups actually who like offer that as a service, which actually I
Hmm.
think is really smart. Some schools have obviously already have that figured out. Heritage School is totally extensible and can be your entire education, all the way from, we say 13 to 18 because that's where like the highest leverage use of it can be. Kids younger than that, it will obviously be effective for them, but like the core of our user base is 13 to 18-year-old nerds.
Yeah.
Like those are the people who thrive. Like it can be slotted in with other things if you
Hmm.
want. I know you do you, but
Yeah.
um,
Like,
it is designed to be the whole.
yeah, you're trying to shuttle out the textbook concept, I guess. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
I'm playing with ideas of just digitizing the existing textbook material and then treating that as a vector store to use AI models over. So it's as if you have a teacher trained on that textbook in particular. So if we can gather a library of the best material of all of this and we can just scan it, use OCR and stick it into vector stores. Be one
That's a really
Yeah,
good idea.
huge. I've actually done it over my math textbook and my biology textbook and it has been really incredible because it's like my teacher, my online virtual teacher, of course, but it's so personalized and it can pull problems directly from the book. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I personally feel like there needs to be, we should identify 4 or 5 core things, and maybe we use AI over those to do that. But I feel like we need to like inject, or maybe we just need to throw out that model entirely. But we do need to have some kind of foundation or common core, quote unquote, I guess, for basic principles of mathematics and reading and literature and language, for sure. I don't know what your opinion on that is. Do you have one?
I this is something I thought about a lot because it's a pretty common objection to be honest with you. And
Hmm.
I don't disagree on principle. I will never build it as part of the platform that you have to do because each kid is different. If a kid has a discussion with their parents like this isn't doing anything for me anymore, it shouldn't be software law. But you can
Right.
always pick English and math and biology, whatever, for your part of the categories you're working in,
Yeah.
and it'll be part of it. So, I don't disagree on principle. I think like, in 10 years, if I'm, well, 15 years, if my kids are doing this, like I will obviously have them be doing English and math. But
Right.
like if they know what they want to do when they grow up, when they're like, by the time they're 13, which they will, because this is something homeschool kids know that
Hmm.
public schoolers rarely do. I think if the Common Core isn't doing anything for them anymore, I'm not going to make them do it.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. That kind of gets back to an idea I have is that you have to want it for yourself. So if you want to learn how to build rockets, you're gonna have to teach yourself or learn the math to build those rockets, irrespective of where you are on the grade ladder. So yeah, that's actually a really interesting perspective. Cool.
I think like your idea of OCR for textbooks, that's a really good idea, by the way. You should keep going with that. I like that a lot. I'll show you the side of what we do in high school, and that might be some inspiration for you. But
Cool.
I think that like, I think that principle can even be taken further of like, what are the, 100 best works of, 100 best books in any given category of learning, from biology to history to economics.
Hmm.
I'll fight you on what the best books in economics are. But can we just have a personalized tutor basically for every kid who stands next to them, metaphorically, of course,
Yeah.
you know, and helps them through it and guides their thinking and pushes them to do better.
Absolutely. And so much of it is the time. Like even homeschooling, I have three siblings and I've got my mom who's teaching them, and her time just goes out the window, and she's teaching four different grade levels, and it's kind of crazy from a time management perspective because she's still got to, clean house and cook food, do shopping and all the things. And so especially, I'm not even going to talk about the amount of time wasted in public school, but especially in the homeschool environment, if you can take the burden off and like ease the commitment, the time commitment anyway. The kid's job is to learn, but if the caretakers, I suppose, if it can be offloaded to something that's instantaneous and will doesn't get frustrated and doesn't get annoyed and will tell you how to do it 10 times over, I think that's kind of the direction we should go. I'm also doing a lot of stuff in disability assistance, so people with learning differences such as dyslexia, and repetition and just over and over and over is really kind of the core concept of getting over those hurdles. So it's no lie that the human mind thrives on repetition. There's kind of like the old classical adage of repeat something 7 times for memorization and further application. And so I think that if we can use AI and other tools, it doesn't even have to be AI in particular, to help reinforce this kind of consistently ingrained repetition, you know, I think that would be also incredible because in the public school environment anyway, you go in, you get the lesson, you take the test, and you never see that again necessarily. And that can happen in homeschooling too. Even if you're doing classical curriculum, you can do something blatantly repeat it, do literally the exact same thing over and over, which was kind of my biggest issue with that co-op is their high school program. You just started repeating stuff, like writing the same kind of essay for 3 years straight. And it's like the same persuasive 5 paragraph essays. Like, okay, guys, same Latin curriculum, same science. It's just like, no, I get the repetition aspect, but it needs to be ingrained repetition. It doesn't need to be you're literally going to do the same thing over and over and over again to
You're
know it.
like, please, I'm falling asleep. Please give me something interesting. Give me something new. Exactly.
Right. Absolutely. Which is kind of obviously there are lots of factors to me exiting that program kind of halfway through, but that was a big one. I was like, I am sick and tired of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And this is homeschooling. This is classical education. This is supposed to be better for me, but I am going nowhere fast? So absolutely. I love repetition.
I'm
Repetition is good, but we should figure out how to do it well. The human mind is so complex, and if we misinterpret it, we're going to screw up so many people, and we have. The proof is in the people around us, really. The products of the public school education system, for sure.
and I had a debate on this recently about like, how much of the purpose of education is citizenship, in America or in, any country. The purpose of the public education system is building good citizens. And I'm
Mm.
like, all right, but like, what is your good citizen? Is it like an active critical thinker, or is it, you know, average Joe? And
Or a
to me,
mind, right?
exactly, it seems to be lowering the common denominator of what our average Joe is. The proof is in, how our society has changed and gotten better in some ways, but the ways that our society has improved have been those who do not conform to this, public education average Joe. I mean, we can take Sam Altman as an example, but we can have a Sam Altman conversation here for quite a while.
Yeah.
So move from that. But like, in principle, there is fundamentally no reason that like, given our current, we're using the same education system as like the time of the rotary telephone and the Model T. Like effectively, like we're using 100, depending on where you start from, 110 years old to 150-year-old education system that was originally started, like the roots of it are in Martin Luther telling German princes to indoctrinate their children, the children of their principality, in the Lutheran faith. That's where the roots of our education system come from,
I
not
think
from any desire to build good people or critical thinking or originality or creativity. It's indoctrination, fundamentally.
hmm it's really good at it, frankly. And it isn't necessarily indoctrination of fact, it's just indoctrination of worldview, because you may not be getting indoctrinated in a faith or a belief anymore, but you're absolutely getting indoctrinated in how you perceive the world, and just how you approach difficulty. Fundamentally, we are, as a culture, I don't know what the statistic is exactly, but like 2.7 million high school students have like severe depression. It's like, why are kids sad? Why are kids sad in school?
They don't
And
have meaning. Exactly.
Exactly, they are purposeless, and why are they purposeless? Because they're told they're purposeless, because they are shown that they're purposeless. It doesn't even have to be direct, but the human mind is really good at reading between the lines when it comes to emotions, and so they're literally being taught that they have no value in the world, and they have been for quite a while. And
I don't know if you've seen this chart, Elijah. If you look at suicide rates among like 13 to 18-year-olds,
Mhm.
on like Christmas break or whatever, it drops like 70%.
Right.
Like on like during the summer, like during summer break, it drops like 90+%.
Mhm. I think I've seen some.
90% suicide rate reduction among teenagers, which, leads you to the causal connection that like to some degree our current standard of education leads to 90% of teen suicide.
Yeah, which is absolutely crazy.
That's
Learning.
not crazy, that's criminal. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
So
what's
for
incredible.
those who say that meaning isn't the purpose of life, I give you that statistic.
Yeah, yeah, and like teenage minds especially. I feel like grade school, I feel like early grade school, obviously, I haven't been in the public school education system in early grade school, but I feel like then is absolutely the time to like drill in the fundamentals. But when the mind dramatically starts to change, the public school system fails, absolutely fails to adapt to the mind changing. Like the mind, the biology that's going on warrants a change in approach, and the standardization is broken beyond repair for sure.
I mean, the one size fits all model can't, every person, should live for their own happiness and their own fulfillment. But that's fundamentally unique to each individual. And a one size fits all model obviously cannot do that for even, a small percentage of kids.
And then the issue is just how do we scale an infinitely different personalized education? Is
You
and
said the Harrison Town School.
yeah, that's a good spot for a plug. But
But
in the current infrastructure, there is no way. There is no way. There's too much bureaucracy. There's no way to scale up to millions of kids with different goals.
I
So that,
don't think it's possible
yeah,
given a reliance on human teachers. I don't think the labor requirement is too much. It's too expensive, and a greater percentage of our working force would have to be teachers.
correct.
And it's already a ridiculously high percent. Like it's one of the most common professions in the United States.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think back to like Aristotle and Socrates. You know, they were teachers and they were students, but they were when they were teaching, they had two or three pupils. And those their students were incredible and incredible minds and incredibly trained. But today you have one teacher to 30 plus in some cases, kids, and there's no room. Um, there's no room for that. It's impossible to.
Elijah, yeah, you saw the educational accelerationism manifesto thing I wrote.
Yeah.
I included the story about Alexander the Great there, which is one of my favorite stories when talking about education. Aristotle was the personal tutor to Alexander the Great, and then like the history isn't like clear, but it's something like 15 to 30 of his like classmates at this like elite cavalry school. He's basically taught them how to be generals and commanders, and it formed the core of Alexander's companion cavalry, which won him like the majority of the battles. It was sort of the signature move. This instruction from Alexander the Great, and obviously like the military discipline bit and the military education, but this education as individuals they got from Aristotle, I credit a large portion of Alexander's successes to this foundation. The king of Macedon literally bought the smartest person he could find. Like literally the only, the most learned mind of his age in Greece. He said, the best investment my kingdom can make is paying this man to teach the next ruler of my kingdom. That is, a four-sided pick that paid off pretty well. I mean, the cost benefit on that is unbelievable. It's just like every kid can't have that until like 4 years ago
Mm-hmm.
or 3 years ago now. When AI came on the scene, it's like, wait, every kid can have that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
infinitely patient, infinitely personalized tutor to make, each kid as exceptional as an individual. I mean, that's invaluable. And it doesn't have to be expensive. That's the best part.
Yeah. especially with stuff. Obviously, AI inferencing hardware and whatnot is really expensive, but if we can take models like R and S1 and other models that are coming to light recently, and if we can just like another thing, obviously, is the black box paradox with AI and the Pandora's box situation with privacy and whatever. But if we can do education centric models, because for my side projects and what I have a lot of stuff that I use AI for, just kind of little self projects, all across the board for assistance. But those LLMs have a vast amount of knowledge, but so much of it isn't going to be used in the education system, or not necessarily in the teaching of the kids. So if we can take a reasoning model and feed it data, but make it a tutor, like a teacher, just put it through teaching examinations, and instead of just an LLM, I don't know what you would call it, a teaching language model. I don't know. But if we can build, our own subset of models that are teachers, they are teachers. They aren't assistants. They are teachers. That would be incredibly invaluable for long-term vision and goals.
Medium term plan of mine is, as the data store in every school keeps getting built, based on like both on what the LLM recommends, its recommendations and its assistance, but also based on, student submissions of like how they complete projects, things like that,
Yeah.
is to fine tune an LLM based on that data. I think that would, that's going to be a marginal gain at first, but I think it's just picking up like 3 percentage points here, a couple
Yeah.
percentage points there, that like will significantly accelerate the usefulness of AI. But it's
Hmm.
already tremendously useful. It just requires really the hardest part of it now isn't on the LLM. Like the LLMs are capable enough now to serve in this role. It's really getting a UI and a UX,
Well, and
the app layer of it to make
how
it
did you
truly
want?
useful.
Yeah,
So it's a complicated problem, but definitely one, I'm working to solve it every day. So
absolutely. So maybe let's
okay.
talk a bit more on the tech side, perhaps. So I'm curious as to, you probably have told me this already, but what's your tech stack? What technologies are you working with Heretic School?
It's a pretty basic like web stack. You know, this is going to be interesting to a very small percentage of our listeners. So let's run through it real quick. Python Flask on the back end. I use Perplexity's models for web search. They're incredible. Perplexity is one of the best AI companies just in the scene right now. Huge fan.
Yeah.
And I use Claude 3.5 Sonnet because if Anthropic could please release a new model, that'd be incredible. It's in
Mhm.
like
Cloud Force
6
on it.
months now.
Yeah.
And then the front end is just React. Trying to keep it as
Yeah.
simple as possible. Since the last time we played around with Tool together, and simplified a lot of
Yeah.
the UI and UX based on feedback from our beta users.
Cool. I tried to log in the other day and it wouldn't let me. So you may have migrated something
Oh, I'm gonna.
in that.
We'll talk about it after the podcast. I'll fix it for you.
Yeah. I was just gonna try and poke you there. Yeah. So, do you have any like special prompting techniques, or like how are you talking? How are you getting the data between the AI and the interface? I guess. What's the magic in getting those to work hand in hand?
I think like nothing about this is super novel, except the way that we build what we call the context block, which is an amalgamation of the most important articles recommended, the ones that the user liked the most, like and then some of like their responses to related questions, and basically building up a much wider frame of context on what the user is doing, so that the AI can find exactly where to slot in a new recommendation. Because otherwise, it falls into the same thought patterns and you end up with 30 of the same recommendation.
Right.
That's obviously not helpful. Um, so trying to, thread the needle of, okay, exactly right here is where the highest leverage addition is going to be. That is what we're optimizing for, and trying to, every new iteration is how do we make every recommendation as astoundingly good as possible? That's my philosophy about it.
Solid. That's cool. How long have you been in development of Heretic School?
This Heritage School or its precursors,
Well, maybe
uh,
user facing beta at the moment.
what is now called Heritage School was a bunch of other names and versions of this before, but Heritage School itself began in July of this year, or
Oh wow.
last year, sorry.
Cool.
But the original version, just called Garbage Education because I couldn't think of a name. So I was like, well, let's go back to naming things after people. October or September, sorry, of 2023. So it's
Nice.
been almost a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. My company turns 3 in a couple days.
You get
First
my
time.
take?
What?
You get my take?
No, but that was when we filed and received our LLC and trademarks and domains and all the things. Is in like 2 weeks. It's been quite an incredible journey. I've done so much since day one, since like 10-year-old
What
me.
you want to just run through the timeline?
Oh,
I know part of the story, but I'd
yeah.
like to hear just condensed start to finish.
Yeah. So when I was like 8.5 years old, I was like, I'm gonna build an operating system, and I'm going to overthrow Microsoft as the head of the PC operating system market. So of course, I need a name for this operating system. I came up with Pyrrhux, Pirux. People try to say Pyrex. It's not Pyrex. It's Pyrrhux. Don't think classware, but after a couple years of just kind of fiddling around, my dad saw an opportunity, and it's kind of like this whole what you love to do passion thing. My dad was like, okay, you love to do this, the passion is there. I'm gonna do it. And so we actually flipped an old LLC he held into Pyrrhix, and then I kind of started learning. And I spent 2.5 years learning all kinds of software development, how to run a company. My dad had like a whole bunch of college books, and he was like, "Okay, son, read these." I was like, "Okay, Dad." Everything from like finance to strategic management, everything, the whole 9 yards. And then the first application, I've published 4 or 5 different tools uh, in a matter of like 4 years ish. The first one I published was a math game. It's called Number Slam. It's mental math designed to help you. It's kind of a quick tool. It's a game. It's aimed at kids like 8 to 13. Just to get better at mental math. So you take numbers and you have to build equations to solve for those numbers on a grid. And right now, my current efforts with that are in India. We're actually doing school competitions and fundraisers for those schools. There's a huge market of kids over there because I'm just gonna say this as a blanket statement. Most kids in the United States don't really give a crap about math. So selling it's a really hard sell to them. But to India,
It's a cultural thing in India that parents will spend an inordinate amount of their discretionary income on education. It's
right?
just a thing.
hmm So that's kind of we're not exploiting it because that sounds bad, but that is absolutely our target market. And we're turning around and giving money back into the school system there because they do need a lot of help. Internet access and computers are not common out there. And so if we can, help build that infrastructure, that's just a good thing to do. And that's kind of like the core motto of my principle is I want to help people. I don't I it's within my skill to build like the next TikTok or the next, degenerate content platform. But I do want to
Yep.
help people. And I also love to learn. So if I can combine those two, it's a really great full circle situation. Anyway, so further on, my co-op did a Latin curriculum, and the vocabulary for that absolutely sucked to work with. So I just created an app for it and typed in JavaScript object notation, every single word in that book. It's like 600 words or something, and just turned that into a flashcard app. And it's just a quick and easy utility tool. And obviously, that's really only for people in that specific um, community group. And then I did a biology app, which is kind of the result. I vectorized my biology textbook and then plugged it into an AI model for that app. So it's kind of a field test, if you will, for AI models and how to use them for smart flashcard sets and whatnot. So it was just a testing playground. It was also mostly built by Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So that was the first time I actually did like a full development cycle with AI assistance, pretty much doing the entire user interface, which was really
And I
nice.
got you on Cursor back at 2E. That was
Yeah,
one of my
thank
finest
you.
accomplishments.
Yeah, I used to like use the Claude web app and just copy paste code in. That's how bad it was. And now Cursor is muy performante.
My
Anyway,
God, beautiful.
I was living in the dark ages at that point. It was brutal. Anyway, context aware completion is also incredible. So that kind of lands me where I'm at today, doing various stuff such as AI music recommendations. I'm building a prototype platform, Studious.music, and yeah, just finding different ways to inject AI into useful and productive things because enough people have done it terribly and unproductively that there's so many holes yet filled in the market. So every day it's a new problem, new challenge, solve it, and ideally figure out how to make money at some point. But until then, just keep racking up side projects. So that's kind of where I'm at now, actually. Side projects after side project after side project.
It's all part of the learning. I mean, it's part of your homeschooling, so it's full circle here. It's all
Mm-hmm.
part of the flow. And this is like one of the things I love about homeschooling as a model, and like what I'm trying to do with middle school is like I think that kids should start not every kid, obviously, that'd be ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
kids who want to start companies to be able to start companies, and that should count for school credit because they're learning stuff. Like
Right.
from software to finance to marketing, across, the whole range of human experience. It's just like unbelievable the degree to which like, any like creative action should count as
Right.
learning because you
Right.
are learning.
And you shouldn't be tied to the grade either. Like getting graded on these projects is so I don't know. I want to say it's like archaic or it's like cavemen, but kids are selling their souls to numerical performance, and it's really hard to tack. It's really hard to put creative energy and assign it a number. So I think that's also a massive issue that needs to be solved. But we're solving it, so that's great.
Yeah, this is something that I've gone to war over this issue basically, like I talked to a lot of parents and they're like, yeah, like, I tried out your app, but like, I had my son complete a project and, he only got feedback. He didn't get a number. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, that's sort of the point. And they're like, no, we want a number. I'm like, all right, cool. So, and then, I talked to some like homeschooling parent, some other parent, and they're like, oh, so like I was working with Heritage School and like, it was only giving feedback before, which is great because my son is very creative, but now he's starting to get numbers. And I'm like, okay. So I've decided that the best solution is Heritage School will not have a philosophy on this. You want a number? That's something important to you as a kid or, to your parents. You can get a number grade on I think there's something about teachers, like professors, they have their own agenda and how they grade things. They'll say they don't. They say it's just to their rubric. That is absolutely just provably false. Like if you are in a political science class and you write an essay and you disagree with the political views of your teacher or professor, you're going to get a worse grade. They are inherently, at a base level biased against it because it goes against their politics. This isn't hard to understand. It doesn't make them a worse person. It's just a fact of nature. This is something AI can do genuinely unbiased because AI doesn't have political views besides that of the entire internet's worth of training data, which dilutes any view to such a
Yeah, Reddit
significant degree.
Reddit should cancel that out pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man, we can have more of a conversation about this. Well, we'll save that for another episode. But, to a great extent, I'm generally in the anti-number grade camp, but I understand why people want it, and I understand for some people with certain learning styles, getting like a hard benchmark for how they're doing is important as a motivation factor.
Right.
Uh, so, Heritage School is now agnostic on this point. It's a very you do you kind of thing. It's in our settings now. You want to grade? Cool. You don't? Fine. Let's go back straight feedback. So this is one of the ongoing debates, I think, in this like next gen education 3.0.
Yeah. Because it's in a lot of ways it is nice to measure your progress. But if you finding a new way to do it. I guess this new era is all about finding the new way to do the old thing. So if you just find it like I like to see my progress, but I don't like grades. Does that make sense? So
I
I
understand. I understand. It's an
I
internal measure, yeah.
right. So I guess I could look at the projects I do and say, okay, I'm progressing. Maybe you have like I'm just kind of brainstorming kind of for you. Don't, I'll have to take this for anything, but maybe you have like a progression graph where you use the AI to like make connections between the projects, like have like a projects view, like build and like have a cumulative, you improved in this way between these projects, right? Like that would satify me way
This
better
is
than,
something I've been kicking around, yeah.
yeah, that'd be really cool for sure.
And I think it's, if we go back, Education 1.0. is Aristotle tutoring Alexander the Great. You know, like some rich guy pays for a smart person to tutor his son. And I say son because daughters did not get educated at that time, which is really dumb. But we're not going to leave it. Education 2.0 was Martin Luther was like, every kid needs to be a Lutheran, okay? Otherwise, the enemies are gonna, the Catholic Church will invade our country and it'll be the end of our great Protestant Reformation.
Hmm.
Education, and then that got secularized into our now public education system. Department of Education, you guys should have a statue of Martin Luther or something.
We'll get to see that go away here in a minute.
Okay,
Yeah,
man, news bulletin. We'll talk about this in a second.
for sure.
Because I do want to hear your thoughts on this. Integrator sounds, Education 3.0 is like the third act, okay? It's like, all right, Education 2.0 did a lot to raise the general standard of living by like, you know, educating everybody in how to be 3+3. It makes people capable factory workers. Like these are important things for the progression of civilization. But at this point, we need an education that is, it finds meaning in doing what you love. Like in a world of people who are like really fucking awesome at doing what they love is like a way more exciting.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that's a good way to put it. An exciting world. If people are
yeah,
unique and if people can think well, the world is exciting. It's exciting to be alive and it's exciting to interact with people. So many people I talk to today that are my age anyway, they're so static. It's like talking to a piece of cardboard. They are not interesting, one-dimensional, and it's sad because it doesn't have to be that way. So let's fix it,
oh my
you know?
God, did you see this trend on TikTok? Oh my God, you hear about blah blah blah. It's like, okay,
I know.
like what do you care about? And it's
Right.
like,
I have never fit into social groups, period. And it's half of it's because, I'm bored. Like they're boring and they call me boring, but they bore me, you know? So, yeah,
exactly, we 100% agree on this.
absolutely.
Which is why like, this might have been Paul Graham. He was like, ambitious people are rare, so they're very infrequently going to be surrounded by other ambitious people. And by, ambitious in this sense, he means like people, high agency people looking to create something. But like when we talk about education, it's really just like creative, interesting people. Like that's what we're trying to optimize for here.
Yeah.
And there just aren't that many of them. And I think that that's not a product of genetics or anything. That is a product of our society, which is a product of our education system. Like that is the root cause here. If we fix this, it is the fulcrum by which we can, shape I think, a far more optimistic destiny for humanity.
Yeah. Good way to integrate the fulcrum there. I was wondering when one of us was going to.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I was like, we gotta get this in here. Um,
yeah.
let's circle back here to this is some current events. The Department of Education news.
I'm excited.
Sorry,
I'm excited.
I agree with you. I am not, personally, I'm not a Trump fanboy by any means.
Yeah.
But first, I'm not sure he can constitutionally get rid of. I don't think he can constitutionally get rid of the Department of Education by executive order. It was founded by an act of Congress. He would need Congress to do that. That doesn't mean he can't downsize it significantly. It
Yeah.
is an executive department. He has a lot of leeway here, and the person he names as Secretary of Education has a lot of leeway to change the focus and responsibilities of the Department of Education.
Yeah.
I'm for getting the state out of education entirely. I don't think it has a justified role there. But getting rid of a federal level, you know, standards, I think is absolutely, you know, uh, it's going to be a dramatic improvement in what states can do to improve education for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be a rocky ride to get there, but when we do, I think the effects will be incredibly positive. And even if it's not within his term of presidency that we see those effects, whatever does happen will permeate. Even with RFK and, well, not maybe RFK, Ramaswamy,
Vivek, yeah.
he's kind of like make America smart again. Like I feel like between
RFK is not about making America smart again. That is not RFK Jr.'s thing.
I
Uh,
know, but between the cabinet, between who Trump has assembled, I think that we will see incredible changes, irrespective of him, within the next 4 to 8 years, most likely.
I don't know. I think the Vivek and Elon Musk team is really dramatically positive shift for America. I don't agree with them on everything, but
Well,
I
yeah,
believe that, it's a positive step in some significant way. We're coming up on the hour here because we're really just very talented yappers here. So let's hit a couple of points and then we'll wrap up.
sounds good.
I think, you included our show notes here, built on a foundation of fear, conformity, and indoctrination. I think we hit that to some degree, but if you want to hit that conformity point,
Yeah, for sure. So, if you think about it, the current public education system is nothing but a a conforming machine. We can get into mimetic theory, and I've done some deep dives into that. And Andrew, you've obviously mentioned
should
some
get
things.
Mackenzie on the podcast.
What?
Should get Mackenzie on the podcast.
Yeah, that would be really
Talk
cool.
about Rene Girard. Yeah.
Right, but these kids, these brilliant minds go into the machine and they come out just like everybody else. And why? Like, what is the causation of this? And at the root, obviously, there's a whole mess of stuff that happens between point A and point B on the indoctrination conforming situation. But the core root of it is that kids are afraid to fail. The education system makes them afraid to fail. And when you're afraid to fail, the how you learn fundamentally changes. If
It's a defensive learning. Yeah.
it's defensive learning, you're learning to keep up with the smart kid next to you. You're learning to make your teacher give you, a better grade. You're selling your soul. I kind of like the idea of selling your soul. You have to build your transcript. You have to get the good grades, You have to apply to the good college so you can get the good job. And it's a hyper success based train of thought. It's a path that is hyper focused on the career ladder, if you think about it. But that leaves you no room for failure. And you can be, I should probably, put a baseline here. You can be dumb and want to learn more, right? But you can also be dumb and be fine being dumb. And there's a difference between wanting to learn and not wanting to learn, wanting to move forward and not wanting to move forward. So, assuming you're wanting to move forward, you're still stuck in this culture of you don't get to fail, because if you fail, then you're missing the rung on the ladder. And that's why a lot of people like, oh, you dropped out of college, or your grades are terrible. So many people, like, what's his name, Bill Gates, dropped out of Harvard. Maybe it was Harvard, maybe it wasn't. I don't really remember, but it's probably Harvard. So many people who have done great things, who are incredibly intelligent, have come through the system, and the results are incredible. They have said the system is not worth me staying in for. And when it's this, it's the man, I am at a loss of words. Sorry, the braces accent doesn't help me at all. But the success failure dynamic is manipulatory. It's manipulatory on the mind. It's manipulatory on your actions, across the board. And so it's kind of like the yes or the no switch. What do you do versus what do you not do? And we've kind of come to the point where creativity is something you don't do to succeed, I guess, is
Exactly.
the point.
And if I'm going to take this one step further, and even in the social aspect, and I promise you guys, I read more things than just Paul Graham. But Paul Graham did talk about this. He goes, yeah, like the main purpose of our system of education is babysitting,
Right.
so that parents can go off and have jobs. Like, except it'd be okay if they just called it babysitting, if they just made it clear. But they give this nebulous goal of we're building great citizens, we're educating you, it's foundation for your career. But, effectively, teachers are babysitters as their primary function. Education is a, tertiary function there. Their primary function is babysitting. From there, they don't care about the Lord of the Flies social situation that the school system produces. It's not cool to be smart in public school. It's not. The dumb kid, it's like, oh, I didn't put in any effort. That's like the cool thing to do.
Right.
That gives you, oh, I didn't study for that test. I just showed up and took it. Yeah, that's the cool thing to do. Essentially, because the education is not actually the purpose, the cool thing to do is not care about the education.
Right.
And instead you end up with these like fake social ladders that have like no, people are like, oh, homeschoolers don't get socialized. It's like, do you think public school is socialization? Really? Do you think that that's an accurate reflection of the world? And the
Right.
thing is that the real world is coming closer to the social situation of a public high school because the vast majority of our population goes through public high school and they never leave that mindset.
Yeah,
It's the ripple effects of that are humongous.
for sure.
Before we wrap up here, anything else from the show notes you'd like to hit?
Not in particular. I think we've got through pretty much everything. There was an interesting quote I found, and it said, kids are forced to sell their soul to the grade. The most brilliant minds in human history didn't need good grades to be smart. And so, what does that say about what we're told today? Socrates never got a grade on his intelligence. Aristotle didn't either. These brilliant minds.
Socrates annoyed people.
Right.
That was his primary contribution to culture, was basically standing in public and yelling at people
Mm-hmm.
to like get them to explain themselves. Like
Right.
that was the peak of intelligence. We still look at him as a model, like, you know, 2,500, 3,000 years later. Like that's unbelievable.
Yeah. They
Um,
didn't need the modern education system to be
of course.
intelligent. Once we understand that
Uh,
and we apply it, we will be infinitely dynamic in how we learn and how we teach.
100% agree with you. With that, I think let's wrap up episode 1 of the Fulcrum of Education. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to us yap for 58 minutes
It has
about the future of education. Yeah. All right. We will see you at the next one. I think let's talk about John Taylor Gatto next time.
that sounds
Really
good.
pioneering thinker in education. And he's, been through the system in its entirety. So that'll be interesting. Tune in next time. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.